I'm going to show you how you can make your presentations more accessible for people with visual impairments using the accessibility feature in Engage. But first, to show you how important this feature is, imagine for a second you had a visual impairment. Say you had diabetic retinopathy. This is what this slide might look like. Glaucoma might look something like this. Macular degeneration might look something like this. And then, of course, there's total blindness. Luckily, there's screen reading software that'll read the information on the slide. But herein lies the problem. You and I see a perfectly logical slide. We see step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But depending in the order in which the slide shapes were put on the slide, the order might be different for the screen reading software. So let's take a look at that. Let's start by showing you the feature. When you click on the accessibility icon over here, it opens up a task pane here for accessibility, and you just want to click the Run Tests button. So as you can see here, it's detected 16 possible issues, and it organizes those possible issues by slide. So we're on slide 5. Let's go here. So there's 2 detected possible issues here. Let's start with this one, the possible reading order issue, and click the Fix button. So it's going to open up this window, and it's going to show you a visual representation of what the order in which the screen reading software would read this slide. So you can see here, it would actually start reading step 4, then it would read step 2, and then it would read step 1, and then it would jump to step 3. So as you can imagine, this doesn't really make any sense for the person trying to access the information on this slide with screen reading software. So not only do we show the visual representation of the order in which the screen reading software would read the information, but we also offer a way to very quickly fix this. But before I show you that feature, I just want to show you the mechanics of this in PowerPoint. So let's go ahead and close this. Let's close this test. And what I want to do is I want to show you the selection pane. I want to show you what the manual way of doing this would be. You'd have to access the selection pane. And what you'd have to do is look at all these different objects and find the one with which you want to start first. And you'd have to manually try to reorder these. And to make things more frustrating and confusing, you actually have to start with the inverse order. So for example, we would want the title to be read out first. Well, you'd have to put that at the very bottom. And then we'd want step 1. So let's go and find step 1. There it is. And then we'd have to put that one there. So this is the manual way. So what you can do with Engage is we've automated this function for you. So let's go back to the accessibility checks, and let's go back to slide 5. So this is now the order. So now you can see we've updated it manually. We have the title that reads out first, and then step 1, but then it goes to step 4. So this is the way you can fix this with Engage. You can click either over then down or down then over, depending on the layout of the slide. So I'm going to click the over then down, and now you can see that the reading order is correct. Now the screen reading software will read the title, then it'll read step 1, the details around step 1, and then it'll go to step 2, and then so on. So this was an example of how you can use Engage to make your slide way more accessible to somebody with a visual impairment by making sure that the order is correct. The other thing we've done is you'll notice these next buttons. You can easily go from one slide to the next and just correct all these problems very quickly. The other thing is, in the event that you have a slide that isn't logically in a logical layout, what you can do is you can also click the selection pane. So that's the shortcut to the selection pane, and you can always have the power in PowerPoint of reordering things as necessary. So I'm going to show you a couple other accessibility checks. So I want to show you the different tests here. So if you click on this button, you'll see that there's a slide title test. So this ensures that there's a slide title. That's a very important thing for people with visual impairment as they're trying to access the information and make sense of the information on the slide by accessing the title. So that's the first test. The other one is a slide description test. So that's a feature I'll show you in a minute, and it's something that we've created. So think of it as a higher level than the title. It's an opportunity to enter information for the entire slide. And this really helps because it helps the person trying to access the information get an overall view of what they're about to access as they tab through the different shapes and text boxes of information on the slide. The other one is the one we just did, which is this slide reading order test. And then the last test is around alt text. So it ensures that if there's an image or a shape or a chart, that there's alt text attached to it. So this is really helpful because if you can imagine an image, well, somebody with a visual impairment might not be able to see that image, but if there's alt text tied to it, then they can make sense of it. So depending on the presentations you're trying to make accessible, you can turn on and off different types of tests here. But for this purpose, let's just keep all these on. So this is one way to access the test. So let's go here on slide 1, missing or blank slide description. So I can click the fix button here and I can add a description for this slide. So I can say this is the title slide, and that's great. So let's go ahead and close this. And I'm going to close this task pane as well, because I want to show you another way you can access this feature. So on this drop down, when you click on this triangle, you'll see that there's different options here. So one of the options is that slide description. So if I click on that, you'll see this is the description I wrote for that title slide. What's nice about this is that you can still work the way you normally work. You can still create your presentations the way you normally create them. And maybe at the very end, you could just run through these tests to make sure that before this presentation gets shared, that it is accessible should it reach someone's desk that has a visual impairment. So we've tried to speed things up for you to make things as easy as possible. So once I've got the description here, I can click on the next button. I don't have to run the test each time. I'm in the mode of just creating a description for each slide. So now I would say this is the exec summary. My main point here is that we have to do this. So you get the description, you're like, okay, this is great. Slide 2 done. Let's go to slide 3 and so on. So it makes it much easier to make your presentation accessible at the very end when you're done. And this is a feature that makes a huge difference for people trying to access this information if they have a visual impairment. Let me show you a couple other things. Say you had images in your presentation. Let's go ahead and add some images here to show you what I mean. So let's add an image of Ottawa and one of Paris. So I'm going to resize these images. And so now I've got, on the left, I've got an image for the city of Paris. And on the right, I've got an image for the city of Ottawa. So if I go back to the accessibility check and I run those tests, I can now see that on this slide, slide 3, I have 2 possible issues around missing alt text. So what that means is that you and I see the images and make sense of it, but for someone with a visual impairment, if there's no alt text, they won't be able to access this information. So let's go ahead and fix this. So if I want to add some alt text here, so I can see that this shape here, this image is selected. So I might just say this is an image for the city of Ottawa. And I could say it's the city of Ottawa at night. It has the Chateau Laurier and the Parliament building in the background. There's a lot of room here to be very descriptive in this alt text. So I'm going to go ahead and save that for now. And when I rerun that test, you'll see that I go from 15 to 14 possible issues because I've solved this one. So that was very easy. What I want to show you is that you can still do this in PowerPoint. So using the PowerPoint native features. So to do that, you can select the image and then you can right click on Format Picture, and under Size and Properties, this alt text here, you can go ahead and add alt text. So this is an image of Paris. So that's the other way. You could do that. That's harder to access that description box, but you can still do it that way. The other thing that's really convenient is if we were to add, say, another image. So let's go ahead and add another image, maybe Toronto. So let's have this third image over here. When I create my presentation, one of the things I could do is, again, at the very end, I can just go through my accessibility checks and just focus on one type of accessibility to make things faster and easier for me. So what I can do is the alt text here, again, to make it faster using Engage, I can just access it here and click Edit. So with that one click, I can just access that alt text right away. I don't have to right click and try to find it. What I can do is I can copy paste this. The other thing I can do is I can click on alt text, I could click copy, and then I can click on the other image, and then I could just go ahead and paste that. And then I can go back and just edit it, and then just get rid of this here, the name of the city, Ottawa, and just put Toronto, and then save that. So it doesn't sound like a big feature, but when you've got dozens of images on dozens of different slides, it's much easier to make this presentation accessible that way. So a couple other things I want to show you. Let's go back to the test here. So we're going to run these tests. Great. So now we're down to 13. I want to discuss this one here on slide 4, for example, the potential false positives. So let's go to slide 4. So you can see that if I click on Fix, this chevron 4 missing alt text, well, I'm not sure how much value having alt text on this chevron would add. So again, this is really up to you to see if it does add value. Then that's something you can do, or if not, you could just leave it blank. So that's something just to consider. So on the topic of alt text, let's talk about infographics as well. So let's maybe get rid of some of the information on this slide, and we'll minimize this. But let's go ahead and add an infographic. So what's nice now is whenever you add an infographic in Engage, there's always a default. If you look here, this accessibility button, there's always a default alt text for that infographic. So when the screen reading software hits that infographic, even if the person can't visually see it, this is what the screen reading software would read. It would say, this is an Engage tree map infographic. Use Control-Shift-D to access the raw data in Excel. So of course, you could update this. You could type in, this is a tree map showing the scientific data for the last 10 years. You always have that power to add and edit this alt text. But to show you what it would be like for somebody with a visual impairment, if I just did Control-Shift-D, what it would do is it would basically open up the Excel spreadsheet here, and then it would let them access via the screen reading software all the data. So as they tab through all this, the cells in Excel, it would read the information from that infographic in a very accessible table format, and would even allow them to go ahead and make changes and then close using Alt F4 the Excel spreadsheet, and it would automatically update the infographic. So we think this is very powerful because it brings that level of accessibility, not just from a reading standpoint, but also to an editing standpoint. So that's the accessibility feature in Engage. Thank you.